the center in the NBA has always been super important. It may have lost its importance in the modern era, but this just allows us to dip into NBA history and look at the 10 greatest centers of all time. To kick off the list, let me tell you a little bit about Nikolajokic. Now, I know that he's been in the league for only 7 years, but he's easily the greatest passing big man to play in the NBA. He's doing things that no one has ever done, and I firmly believe Jokic will be much higher on this list by the time his career comes to a close. Not to mention, he's already won 2 MVPs, back-to-back by the way, and set the record for the higher player efficiency rating at 32.8. Absurd. Jokic isn't exactly the most aesthetic player to watch, but then again, which center ever was? It's just outrageous to see some of the things he does. The Nugget superstar may not be the best defender, but his positioning is superb, and he's getting better every passing season. My hot take is that, when it's all said and done, he'll be the best big man shooter of all time. He just needs a ring to convince the haters. But back-to-back MVPs isn't a joke, especially considering that the last one to do it makes the list too. Yeah, I'm talking about Moses Malone. Now, some might argue that Malone should be higher up on the list, and I'd agree. The only reason he's 9th on this list is that there's very little separating these players. After all, he won the MVP award 3 times in his career. The chairman of the boards, as he was known, was probably the best center of his era based on longevity. Had he won another ring, I'd put him in the top 6. But that finals MVP certainly makes a strong case for someone who had an efficiency rating of 22 and a 179.1 win shares. Simply put, the man was a serial winner who loved winning, very much like the next entry. Willis Reed, who certainly knew how to win, a super clutch center. This guy was sensational. The man won the NBA twice and the finals MVP on both occasions too. A 7-time All-Star, Reed's peak was insane. Many underrate him, and that's their loss, because Reed was more than just a great player and center. He was also a proper leader, and he led some of the biggest names in the NBA. We just had to include him, you know? Basically, he was Tim Duncan before Tim Duncan, and he was also super dominant. But talking about being dominant, this wouldn't be a list of the greatest without David Robinson. They called him the Admiral, and for good reason too. From rebounding titles to blocks titles to scoring titles, there was nothing he couldn't do. A 2-time champion and an MVP, Robinson was basically a player with Cat's offense, in Gobert's body but with Marc Gasol's defense. Oh, and the strength of Embiid. Yep, that's D-Rob. But he definitely wasn't as big a winner as the next center on the list. The man, the myth, and the legend, George Mikan, of course. But that's hardly any shade on Robinson. Few players were bigger winners than Mikan. It's absurd because Mikan was the player who invented the fundamentals. No one played the center position better than him, before him that is. Few have managed it since. A true superstar who won 78% of the championships he played, Mikan was the monster. You know the skyhook? Well, it was based on his footwork. Mikan drills are taught to each center, and someone who definitely learned a lot from Mikan's tapes is Hakeem Olajuwon, comfortably a top 5 center of all time. The Dream came from Nigeria, and he was basically the first superstar in the NBA from overseas. And what a sensational player he was. The Rockets made a great decision to recruit him. Olajuwon led the Rockets to 2 NBA titles in the 90s. That alone is worth as much praise as you could possibly give him. The greatest Rocket of all time, Hakeem put Houston on the NBA map. In fact, he'd be the GOAT if his draft buddy wasn't a certain Michael Jordan. But few mastered the art of offense and defense better than Olajuwon. One player who might be on that list is, points to you if you guessed it, it's Big Shaq. What a player, man. You're lying if you try to say that Shaq didn't get you excited in your childhood. He was the player to watch. Superman, Shaq Daddy, the big Aristotle. He was everything that a center would want to be. From broken boards to haunting dreams for the opposition players, Shaq was the definition of dominance, and he did it all too. Three-time Finals MVP, Shaq won the NBA on 4 occasions and also made it to the All-Defense NBA team 3 times. What I'd give to see him in action again. But for all his greatness, he doesn't make it to the top 3, because this trio is on another level. And kicking that off is Wilt Chamberlain. And let me tell you, there'll never be another like him in the game. There isn't a single record that Wilt Chamberlain didn't already put on the stat line. I mean, come on. The man scored 100 points. He was basically the bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, and better defensively version of Shaquille O'Neal. It was just unfair. He didn't only have the height, he had the skill too. And the fact is, if he'd applied himself more and focused more on winning rather than on statistics, he'd be the outright greatest player, as well as the greatest center in the NBA. But when you have all that skill set and win the NBA only twice with 1 Finals MVP, you gotta settle for 3rd. Which isn't bad considering the most successful NBA player of all time can only come in at 2nd place. Yeah, you're right, it's Bill Russell. What a player. 11 championships, 5-time MVP, and 12-time All-Star. Only 1 All-Defense selection, but that was because it was the only year they had it, and he made it. Whatever you say about Russell, the man's the greatest defender the NBA has ever seen. Basketball, in fact. To an extent that Red Auerbach would sit Russell out of practice when the team needed to work on defense. While there aren't any stats from his time, there's plenty of footage full of games where he's having 20-plus blocks in a single game. The OG GOAT, the ultimate competitor, the ability to win. Greatness personified, and then you have that sensational off-court impact too. Now, before we move to the greatest center of all time, there's got to be an honorable mention or two, right? Yep, we can't complete the list without Patrick Ewing and Bob McAdoo. Bob McAdoo was a proper scoring center who probably had the most pristine mid-range jump ever. A 2-time NBA champion, McAdoo once averaged 34.5 points per game for the entire season, and he could do enough on the defensive end as well. Meanwhile, Patrick Ewing, well, what a tremendous player. While he never won a title, he was still a great player who remains 7th in blocks with 11 All-Star appearances. But a player who had it all and remains the all-time scoring leader in NBA history is also the best center of all time. Finishing off with the all-time scoring leader, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. At least at the time of the filming of this video, he is the scoring leader. So for what it's worth, he deserves to hold on to that accolade, even though it's only a matter of a few games now. Kareem was iconic. Up there in the GOAT debate as well, his skyhook shot remains one of the greatest plays ever. I mean, come on. A man who won 6 NBA titles and 2 Finals MVPs and leads the NBA in scoring is 3rd in blocks and rebounds? He has to be the best center of all time, right? We'll find out. See you in the next video.